Good evening, everybody. President Trump today taking the lead on tax reform, proposing a massive overhaul that would slash rates for nearly all Americans and stimulate economic growth. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, the director of the president's National Economic Council, taking the lead at the White House press briefing today. They introduced the plan to the news media. The president's proposal would reduce the number of individual tax brackets from 7 to 3, 10, 25, and 35%. It would double the standard deduction individuals can take and proposes cutting the corporate rate from 35% down to 15%. The plan would also exempt the first $24,000 of income from taxation, repeal the estate tax, the alternative minimum tax. It would eliminate deductions, however, for state and local taxes. And administration officials say the plan is a broad brush outline at this stage. Details such as the overall cost still unknown, but it will be substantial. Mnuchin and Cohn said the plan would pay for itself with resulting higher economic growth.
This tax reform package is about growing the economy, creating jobs. The 3.8% tax on capital gains, dividends, and interest, the president looks at that very seriously as being a tax on capital being spent to stimulate economic growth. So we're trying to get rid of that to be more stimulative, to have capital go back into the economy to create more jobs.
The economic plan under Trump will grow the economy and will create massive amounts of revenues.
Massive amounts of revenue. The president himself working on economic growth, issuing more new executive orders. The first one directing his Interior Secretary to review the designation of dozens of national monuments on federal lands, something that Mr. Trump considers an Obama massive land grab.
I've spoken with many state and local leaders, a number of them here today, who care very much about preserving our land and who are gravely concerned about this massive federal land grab. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And now we're going to free it up, which is what should have happened in the first place. This should never have happened.
And shortly before the President Obama left office, he infuriated Utah citizens by creating the Bears Ears National Monument. And in so doing, taking more than 1 million acres of land from the state. Critics say the move jeopardized jobs, economic growth, and President Trump signed an executive order requiring Education Secretary Betsy DeVos to study whether the federal government has overstepped its authority from K to 12 schools. That order, part of Mr. Trump's efforts to shift power from Washington, D.C. back to the states and local communities, envisioned by the Constitution. That would be the proper thing to do. No wonder it hasn't been fulfilled by the Education Department. Not by the central planners and statists of the left. Keep faith that America will be made great again. Our first guest tonight here to discuss the breakneck pace of the Trump administration's accomplishments and vowing a similarly ambitious agenda over the next 100-day period. Joining me tonight, this the 97th day, if you're going to keep count, and we are. Kellyanne Conway, also keeping count, counselor to the president. Kellyanne, great to have you with us.
My pleasure, Lou.
It's fascinating to see the issues that the president is taking on, reclaiming land taken by the Obama administration from the states, and under the most specious of circumstances, calling it, designating it under the monuments regulations. It is just preposterous what has to be taken on by the Trump administration because of the passivity and domestically the aggressiveness of the Obama administration.
Well, and you even see with something as ambitious as his tax reform and relief plan, as you've just laid out there, Lou, it's just an incredibly historic moment here for the country, whether it's the illegal boarding crossings down to a 17-year low by about 61% since he was sworn in, the 553,000 jobs that have been created since he was sworn in, the unleashing of investments that American job creators have done in just the last 3 months or even the 5 months since he was elected. The numbers tell the tale of people feeling very confident, satisfied with the economy. And on the Antiquities Act, boy, I knew Americans were paying attention, but a woman came up to me at the Easter egg roll a week ago Monday and said, I live in Louisiana, and I hope you're all focused on the expiration of the Antiquities Act. Or I hope you're, and at the Easter egg, when people out there are paying attention, I tell the president nearly every day, it's a huge country out there where so many people are rooting for you, rooting for the country's success, support you, are praying for you, and think you're doing a great job because you're making good on these promises and you're making down payments on the rest of the agenda. You know, President Obama took 16 months to get his Obamacare passed. President Trump hasn't even been here 16 weeks. And they're making great progress on repealing and replacing Obamacare and putting something else in there that is more equitable to more Americans.
You know, I have to say, Obama as the standard for the Trump, and I know you're making a simple comparison on your predecessor, your presidential predecessor in this administration, but there is just no compromise. There is no comparison. To look at the energy this president brings to the White House, to the Oval Office, to these issues, and compare that to the passivity of the Obama administration, passivity, indifference, whatever you want to call it, utter confusion. There is no comparison whatsoever. I think we're going to have to go back to FDR to look at and perhaps Jack Kennedy in some measure to find parallels for the way you all have begun.
So while we've been researching the historic nature of the 100 days, it's very clear that President Trump has enacted more executive orders and legislation than any president in 50 years. And some of the measures are actually literally historic. So these Congressional Review Acts, Lou, I mean, I can't think of a measure that he has taken more than the regulatory rollback of these burdensome, cumbersome, unnecessary intrusions into our liberties. Right. That plus the Congressional Review Acts. President Trump has done 13 of them. President George W. Bush had done 1 in his first 100 days. President Obama, 0. That's not A-OK. That's a big fat 0. So even something like that, and there's such a diversity on them. One's protecting jobs, the other is getting the federal government out of education a little bit, and others. But he's taken action on that instead of saying, well, let's just study it. Let's get a task force. Let's get a commission. Let's do it sometime later. And people notice. But look, he likes to say he's inherited a mess a bit, but even apart from that, it's all the things he's promised to do.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, and look at what's going on at the border, in our factories. Look at the safety and security. So we all know the enhancements at the border. We all know the money that's been invested there already, that he's directed to be investment. But even where the local communities, our law enforcement, our first responders, they know that he supports them in a way that people feel like he's invested in community safety as well as border security. And look at 16 bilateral meetings since he got here. You've got world leaders from very different places around the globe, Lou, who are coming here open to the new president and commander-in-chief.
You know, you're right. I mean, by the way, we could keep that list going because this president began his presidency on November 9th, as you well know, because you're amongst those people who are having to go 24/7 with this president who has boundless energy, taking on these issues, talking to CEOs, creating jobs, and with no question about it, not without some setbacks and some reversals and some considerable frustration. Does this president, in your judgment, right now as he takes on the most important issue, it's hard to say that, but one of the most important issues in tax reform, does he have Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, who has been an obstacle and an impediment throughout, does he have this man under control?
Well, the president works with Speaker Ryan very closely and Leader McConnell on any number of issues. But look, on tax reform, it's very clear that the president put forth his plan, his vision today through his top lieutenants in the cabinet, Secretary Mnuchin and Mr. Cohn. And this is important because you want to go bold and you want to go very courageous, and you want to go. So people at the beginning had said, hey, we think President Trump may enact the largest tax cut since Reagan. This is actually bigger than that. When Steve Mnuchin said the biggest in U.S. history, he means it. And look, the tax burdens, we spend billions of hours and billions of dollars a year just trying to comply with this tax code.
No, I don't think that, I haven't heard
on.
a single person, Kellyanne, say, you know what, the president didn't go big enough in this broad brush outline that we got today from Cohn and Mnuchin. But, at the same time, I have heard from just about everybody great concern about the leadership of the House of Representatives, none whatsoever about Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, but focusing again, will Paul Ryan be Paul Ryan one more time? And everybody saying it better not happen. It just better not happen.
Well, we hope that we have the Speaker's support on this, and of course all the committee chairmen and frankly the conference. We also would love some Democratic support. John Kennedy cut taxes, Lou. Whatever happened to that part of the Democratic Party? We used to have boll weevil Democrats, blue dog Democrats, fiscally conservative Democrats. Where are they? This party has been, pulled very far to the left, but we would love to have Democratic support on fundamental historic tax reform. Otherwise, they're going to have to go back home where their constituents are going to benefit anyway. Talk about the president of all Americans. Do you remember on November 9th, President Trump said, I'll be the president of all Americans, including those who didn't vote for me, and then he ad-libbed, and that's more than a few of you. This tax reform package. By the way, that would have included
Paul Ryan. And to the point that you're making, the fact is that with Republicans controlling the House and the Senate, it is time for the Republican Party, I'm not talking about just the president who leads this party, but for the Republican Party, show the voters of this country who put their faith in each one of these congressmen and senators and this president that it matters who is running the country. And they better show respect to this president and follow his lead. Would you say that's a fair statement?
It's a fair statement that he is the man leading. President Trump is the man leading on tax reform. This is his package, his idea. Obviously, he needs to work with the Congress, and we're hopeful about that. Look, George W. Bush as president got tax reform passed in June of 2001, his first term.
Right.
And he relied on 10 or 12 Democratic senators to do that, many of whom were up for re-election the next year. So we're very hopeful and expectant that the Republicans will certainly see this as a good plan. Let me just say, the old saying, go bold or go home, has some resonance, but I'm telling the Republicans today, and the Democrats, frankly, if you go bold on tax reform, you're able to go home because you have a great story to tell. Go back to those town halls, face your voters, and be able to look them in the eye and say, we went from 7 brackets to 3. We got rid of all the special interest loopholes, and we did it for the middle class.
And you know what? You're to be commended, and we do commend you for doing so. And but don't go home. There's just too doggone much work to do. And about the Democratic Party, we can't explain the Republican Party half the time, let alone the Democratic Party. Thanks so much, Kellyanne Conway.
Thank you, Lou.
Thanks so much. We're coming right back. There's a lot more to cover. We are already over our allotted time, so stay with us. We're going to pick up the pace.